What if I told you that a family of 6 can grow an entire year's worth of food in a space smaller than your living room? The Amish have been doing exactly that for generations, using ingenious methods most modern gardeners never discover. While the average American throws away 30% of their groceries, Amish communities waste less than 3%, all while growing food in spaces most would consider impossibly small. These 20 Amish techniques could revolutionize how you think about food self-sufficiency, even if you only have a tiny backyard or patio to work with. The Amish approach to garden planning. Growing enough food to feed a family for an entire year might seem like an impossible task, especially when working with limited space. Yet the Amish have perfected this art through generations of careful planning and thoughtful cultivation. Their approach isn't just about planting seeds and hoping for the best. It's a calculated system that begins long before the first seedling touches soil. When planting their gardens, Amish families start by calculating their exact food needs based on caloric requirements. This isn't some complex mathematical formula. It's as simple as knowing that an average adult needs about 2,000 calories daily and then mapping out which crops provide the most nutrition per square foot. A family of 4 might need approximately 250 pounds of potatoes, 100 pounds of beans, and 75 pounds of corn to meet their carbohydrate needs for the year. One of the most remarkable aspects of Amish garden planning is their 10-minute exercise that practically doubles productivity in tiny gardens. Many Amish farmers use nothing but a piece of paper and a pencil to plan their entire year's food supply. Most people plant what they like, not what they need, but when you map out your meals for just 1 week and multiply by 52, you suddenly see the real numbers. The Amish are meticulous about preventing food waste. Unlike our modern tendency to overbuy at grocery stores, they plan harvest quantities down to the last preserved jar. If a family can only process 10 bushels of tomatoes before they spoil, then planting enough for 15 bushels is simply wasteful. This careful balance between preservation capacity and planting volume ensures nothing goes to waste. Amish families also incorporate seasonal planning that accounts for crop rotation and soil health. Their planting calendars often span 3 years, allowing them to track which crops deplete certain nutrients and which ones replenish them. By understanding that certain crops like beans and peas add nitrogen to the soil while others like corn and tomatoes deplete it, they create balanced growing cycles that maintain soil fertility naturally. Tiny homestead layout design. Have you ever wondered how Amish families manage to squeeze so much productivity out of seemingly small spaces? Their secret lies in the way they organize their homesteads. Traditional Amish properties might not be as large as commercial farms, but every square inch serves a purpose in their meticulously designed layouts. Sun mapping techniques form the foundation of Amish garden design. Amish gardeners observe their land through different seasons, noting how sunlight moves across their property. They place tall structures and plants on the northern edge of their gardens, while shorter plants go toward the south. This simple practice prevents taller plants from casting shadows on shorter ones. I tried to explain this sun mapping concept to my city friend once, and he asked if he could just download an app for it. Guess his thumb isn't the only thing that isn't green. Creating microclimates is another Amish specialty that extends growing seasons without complex technology. By positioning stone walls or water barrels strategically, they create pockets of warmth that protect tender plants from early spring frosts or late fall chills. Some Amish gardeners place dark-colored stones around heat-loving plants like peppers and eggplants. During the day, these stones absorb sunlight, and at night, they slowly release that stored heat. The integration of animal housing within the garden ecosystem reflects the Amish understanding that nothing should exist in isolation. Chicken coops positioned near compost piles allow birds to scratch through materials, speeding decomposition while finding insects. Rabbit hutches placed above garden beds provide direct fertilization. Even goat and cow shelters are positioned to create windbreaks that protect delicate plants. Amish homestead layouts also incorporate water management systems that capture rainfall and direct it to where it's needed most. Simple swales follow the natural contours of the land, slowing water flow and allowing it to percolate into the soil rather than running off. Rain barrels positioned at the corners of structures collect roof runoff, providing irrigation water during dry periods. The Amish soil management system. Looking at truly productive gardens, what's beneath the surface matters most. For generations, Amish communities have developed soil management techniques that transform even poor ground into fertile growing space. Their methods don't rely on expensive store-bought products, but instead use materials readily available on any homestead. The heart of Amish soil improvement is their famous 18-day compost recipe. While conventional composting might take months, this accelerated method produces rich, dark material in less than 3 weeks. The process involves layering green materials like fresh grass clippings with brown materials such as dried leaves or straw in specific ratios, maintaining proper moisture, about as damp as a wrung-out sponge, and turning the pile every 3 days creates ideal conditions for decomposition. This quick-cooking compost introduces beneficial microorganisms that create living soil teeming with microscopic helpers. Did you know that coffee grounds can boost garden yields by up to 30%? The Amish discovered this long before coffee shops appeared on every corner. They collect used grounds and apply them strategically around certain crops. Blueberries, strawberries, and tomatoes particularly benefit from the slight acidity and nitrogen boost. The grounds also attract earthworms while deterring certain pests, solving multiple garden problems with one simple material. Next time you brew a pot, remember those grounds are garden gold. Even in the smallest growing spaces, Amish gardeners implement cover crop strategies. Rather than leaving soil bare between plantings, they sow fast-growing crops like buckwheat or clover that can be turned under just weeks later. These green manures prevent erosion, suppress weeds, and add organic matter exactly where it's needed. In tiny spaces, they might use cut-and-drop methods rather than turning soil, simply snipping the cover crops at soil level and leaving the roots to decompose underground while the tops become instant mulch. The Amish approach reminds us that healthy soil isn't manufactured. It's cultivated through observation and patience. By feeding the soil rather than just the plants, they create growing environments that become more productive each season rather than being depleted. Foundation crops for small spaces. When space is tight but hunger is real, choosing the right starter plants makes all the difference. The Amish have refined the art of selecting foundation crops that not only feed families, but also prepare the soil for future plantings. Their approach turns limitations into advantages through strategic planting. Beans top the list of must-plant starter crops in Amish gardens. These versatile plants feed both people and soil simultaneously. A single bush bean plant in a good season can produce up to half a pound of beans, enough for several family meals, while its roots form partnerships with soil bacteria that capture nitrogen from the air. This free fertilizer remains in the soil after harvest, benefiting whatever grows there next. As one Amish farmer puts it, chemical fertilizer is like coffee for your plants, works great until the crash comes. Quick-growing soil builders earn their place in tiny Amish homesteads through multitasking. Radishes mature in just 25 to 30 days, providing a harvestable crop while their roots break up compacted soil. Their rapid growth also smothers potential weeds, solving 3 garden problems at once. Buckwheat flowers can transform a garden patch in just 6 weeks, attracting crucial pollinators while its roots exude compounds that make phosphorus more available to future crops. When turned under, buckwheat decomposes rapidly, enriching soil just in time for fall plantings. Timing matters as much as crop selection in the Amish system. Foundation crops aren't planted randomly, but follow carefully planned rotations that maximize soil improvement while providing continuous harvests. Peas might go into the ground as soon as soil can be worked in early spring, feeding the family by early summer before the space transitions to heat-loving crops. After summer harvests, fast-growing greens like arugula or spinach capture the last warm days while their roots hold soil in place through winter rains. The Amish wisdom of starting with soil-building crops rather than jumping straight to heavy feeders like corn or tomatoes ensures sustainable production year after year, turning small spaces into perpetual food machines. The chicken integration system. Sustainable gardens don't exist in isolation. They're part of a living system. In Amish communities, chickens play a crucial role in garden success. Unlike modern approaches that separate animals from plants, the traditional Amish method weaves them together in a dance that benefits both. Seasonal grazing schedules form the backbone of the Amish chicken integration system. As gardens move through their yearly cycle, chickens are deliberately moved to different areas at specific times. After harvest, birds clean up fallen fruits and vegetables while scratching for insects. During spring preparation, chickens are briefly allowed into garden areas to scratch up early weed seedlings and hunt for grubs. Free pest control with breakfast included. Water systems in Amish homesteads serve multiple purposes. Clever designs allow chicken waterers to simultaneously irrigate adjacent plants. Slightly elevated platforms with waterers at the center let excess moisture drip directly onto plants below. During hot summer months, this dual-purpose system can reduce watering needs by up to 25% compared to separate systems. Different chicken breeds contribute varying amounts of nitrogen to the soil. Heritage breeds generally deposit between 0.5 and 1.5 pounds of nitrogen per bird annually, a significant contribution in small spaces. Amish farmers select breeds like Buckeyes and Dominiques not just for egg production, but for their active foraging behavior that distributes manure more evenly. Noise management becomes important in smaller homesteads, especially for those with nearby neighbors. Amish families often build co-ops with extra insulation in the walls, which reduces early morning crowing volume by as much as 60%. One elderly Amish farmer noted that, "A rooster who doesn't wake the neighbors is worth his weight in gold." The practical wisdom of keeping peace with those around you while still maintaining traditional practices exemplifies the balanced Amish approach. Intensive square-foot gardening. Maximizing food production in minimal space isn't just a modern concern, it's been an Amish specialty for generations. Their version of intensive gardening turns tiny plots into remarkably productive growing spaces through careful planning and planting density. The grid system employed by traditional Amish gardeners predates today's popular square-foot gardening methods by many decades. Garden beds typically measure 4 feet wide, just narrow enough to reach the center from either side without stepping on the soil. These beds are mentally divided into 1-foot squares, with each square assigned a specific number of plants based on their mature size. Studies have shown that intensive planting methods can increase yields by 300 to 400% compared to traditional row gardening. The key is proper spacing that maximizes use of the soil while still giving each plant just enough room. Lettuce planted in rows might yield 5 heads in a given area, while the same space using intensive spacing could produce 20 heads. Makes those sad little herb pots on your windowsill seem like underachievers, doesn't it? Staggered planting times create continuous harvests in Amish gardens. Instead of sowing an entire crop at once, seeds are planted in small batches every week or two. This succession planting ensures a steady supply rather than a sudden glut followed by nothing. A square foot that grows spinach in April might transition to beans in June and then fall carrots in August. 3 distinct crops from the same small space. Plant selection for efficient space use involves choosing varieties bred for compact growth. The Amish maintain seed stocks of vegetables that produce well in tight quarters. Bush varieties of beans and cucumbers stay relatively compact while still delivering generous harvests. Even corn can be grown intensively with the right varieties. Vertical growing revolution. Space becomes a precious resource when your garden footprint is limited. Traditional rows simply won't produce enough food in a tiny homestead. That's where growing upward instead of outward changes everything. The vertical techniques perfected by Amish gardeners over generations make the most of every square inch while actually reducing maintenance. Building trellises from minimal materials is a hallmark of Amish resourcefulness. Simple structures using just a few wooden stakes and some twine can support surprising amounts of produce. The classic A-frame design used in many Amish gardens provides 2 growing surfaces while requiring minimal materials. Plants grown vertically receive better airflow around their leaves, naturally reducing fungal diseases by up to 60% compared to the same crops grown on the ground. Harvesting becomes easier too. No more hunting through sprawling vines to find that hidden cucumber. The Three Sisters method has been practiced for centuries, but Amish gardeners have adapted it for vertical space efficiency. Corn stalks serve as natural trellises for climbing beans, while squash spreads below, shading the soil and deterring weeds. In spaces as small as 3 feet by 3 feet, this companion planting approach can yield 20 pounds of food, about 10 times what the same space would produce in conventional single-crop plantings. The plants seem to understand the concept of teamwork better than most office workers on Monday morning. Climbing plants produce remarkable yields when properly supported. A single pole bean plant can climb 8 to 10 feet and produce up to 4 pounds of beans in a good season. Cucumber yields typically double when grown vertically rather than allowed to sprawl. The secret lies not just in the support structures, but in proper training techniques. Amish gardeners check their vertical crops regularly, gently guiding new growth onto supports and pinching back excessive vegetation. These few minutes of maintenance each week translate to significantly higher harvests from the same footprint. Container. Growing secrets. Not everyone has access to open ground for gardening. Container growing provides a solution that works even on balconies, patios, or tiny backyards. The specialized soil mix recipe developed by Amish gardeners ensures success where many container gardens fail. The foundation of the Amish container soil blend combines equal parts compost, garden soil, and coarse sand. This mixture holds enough moisture to sustain plants while providing the drainage that prevents root rot, the main killer of container plants. For crops that demand more nutrients like tomatoes or peppers, they add 1/4 part aged manure to power abundant harvests. This balanced medium outperforms expensive store-bought potting soils at a fraction of the cost. Root vegetables traditionally need deep soil, making them challenging for container growing. Yet Amish gardeners have perfected techniques for growing root crops in buckets with remarkable results. Carrots grown in deep 5-gallon buckets with drainage holes can yield twice what the same space would produce in a garden bed. The controlled environment allows for perfect soil composition and moisture levels. The trick lies in proper layering, coarse materials at the bottom for drainage, followed by the growing medium with a thin layer of compost on top that's refreshed monthly. Creative container configurations maximize space efficiency in Amish homesteads. Stair-step arrangements ensure that each plant receives adequate sunlight while using vertical space. Hanging containers utilize overhead areas, and window boxes take advantage of unused wall space. One Amish family in Ohio grows over 30% of their annual vegetable needs entirely in containers on a space no larger than the average living room. Their tiered system uses the walls, railings, and even overhead spaces of their modest back porch. Vertical herb spiral construction. Herbs add flavor, medicine, and beauty to any homestead, but they often have conflicting growing needs. Enter the herb spiral, a space-saving solution perfected by Amish gardeners that creates multiple growing environments in one compact structure. The basic design rises from ground level in a spiral shape, typically reaching about 3 feet high and 5 feet across. This clever arrangement packs an impressive 20 or more herb varieties into a space that would normally accommodate just 5 or 6 plants in a traditional flat bed. The spiral shape creates a path that's over 25 feet long while occupying a tiny footprint in your garden. It's like having a full herb garden that takes up less space than a dining table. What makes the spiral truly remarkable is how it creates multiple microclimates in one structure. The top remains drier with excellent drainage, perfect for Mediterranean herbs like rosemary and thyme that prefer arid conditions. The middle sections provide moderate moisture, ideal for culinary staples like parsley and chives. The lower coils naturally collect more water, creating ideal conditions for moisture-loving plants like mint and watercress. These natural moisture gradients mean each plant gets exactly what it needs without separate irrigation systems. Building materials often come from the homestead itself in Amish communities. Stones gathered from fields, reclaimed bricks, or even logs can form the structure. The Amish approach emphasizes working with what's available rather than purchasing new materials. A typical spiral requires about 200 small stones or 75 bricks, materials that might otherwise go unused. The soil inside is layered specifically for herbs, with coarse material at the center for drainage, topped with rich, well-draining herb soil. Dwarf fruit production. Techniques. Fresh fruit doesn't require acres of land or years of waiting. The Amish have pioneered methods to grow productive fruit trees in tiny spaces through specialized pruning and training techniques. These methods yield surprising harvests from minimal space. Espalier training against walls and fences transforms fruit trees into space-efficient two-dimensional forms. This centuries-old technique involves training branches horizontally along supports, creating living sculptures that produce abundant fruit. An espaliered apple tree might extend just 8 inches from a wall while spreading 8 feet wide, occupying space that would otherwise go unused. The practice originated in medieval monasteries where garden space was limited but has been perfected by the Amish for homestead use. When your orchard is flatter than a pancake, you know you're doing something right. Selection of ultra-dwarf varieties forms the foundation of the Amish approach to small space fruit growing. These specially bred trees mature at just 4 to 6 feet tall instead of the 20-plus feet of standard varieties. Despite their compact size, they produce standard-sized fruits. A single ultra-dwarf peach tree can yield 50 to 75 pounds of fruit in a space just 3 feet across. The Amish carefully select varieties for disease resistance and cold hardiness appropriate to their local climate, ensuring reliable harvests year after year. Strategic pruning maximizes production in these compact trees. The Amish method involves removing inward-growing branches and maintaining an open center to allow sunlight to reach all parts of the tree. This approach increases fruit production by up to 40% compared to unpruned dwarf trees. Summer pruning rather than winter pruning keeps trees smaller while encouraging more fruit production. Through these techniques, an Amish family can grow apples, peaches, pears, and cherries in a space the size of a small bedroom. Water-saving irrigation hacks. Water shortages affect gardens everywhere, yet Amish communities have developed remarkably effective irrigation methods that conserve this precious resource. Their techniques reduce water usage while keeping plants thriving, even during dry spells. Deep mulch methods stand out as perhaps the most effective water-saving technique in the Amish gardening toolkit. Applying organic mulch at a thickness of 4 to 6 inches can reduce watering needs by a stunning 80%. The mulch layer prevents evaporation, maintains soil temperature, and gradually breaks down to improve soil structure. Straw, leaves, grass clippings, and wood chips are all used depending on what's locally available. One Amish gardener tracked her water usage before and after implementing deep mulch, finding she needed just 20 gallons weekly for her vegetable garden instead of the previous 100 gallons. Self-watering container systems based on traditional Amish designs work through simple physics rather than complicated mechanisms. A reservoir at the bottom of the container allows water to be drawn up into the soil through capillary action as plants need it. These containers reduce watering frequency from daily to just once or twice weekly. The systems are typically made from common materials like 5-gallon buckets, with one bucket nesting inside another. The inner bucket, which holds soil and plants, has small holes drilled in the bottom to allow water to seep up from the reservoir below. Targeted irrigation delivers water exactly where plants need it most, at the root zone. Amish gardeners often use buried clay pots, ollas, filled with water that slowly seeps through the clay walls into the surrounding soil. A single buried olla can effectively water a 3-foot diameter area for up to a week before needing a refill. More elaborate systems use simple gravity-fed pipes with tiny holes positioned near plant roots. These methods ensure up to 90% of water goes directly to plants instead of being lost to evaporation or weeds. Natural pest management in small spaces. Keeping pests under control without harsh chemicals presents a challenge for any gardener. Throughout generations, Amish farmers have refined natural methods that maintain the balance between helpful and harmful insects, especially in compact growing areas. Companion planting matrices create natural pest barriers throughout the garden. Marigolds planted alongside tomatoes reduce nematode damage by up to 70% through chemicals naturally released by their roots. Basil improves the flavor of tomatoes while repelling flies and mosquitoes. Nasturtiums act as trap crops for aphids, drawing them away from valuable vegetables. The complex scents and chemicals these combinations create confuse insects that typically find their host plants through smell. It's like trying to find someone in a crowded mall where everyone's wearing the same perfume. Making garlic spray pesticide costs pennies compared to commercial options and effectively controls a wide range of garden pests. The simple recipe used in Amish gardens combines crushed garlic cloves, a small amount of mineral oil, and water. After steeping for 24 hours and straining, the spray disrupts the feeding of soft-bodied pests like aphids and repels many others through its strong scent. A 2018 university study found homemade garlic spray reduced aphid populations by 75% when applied weekly, nearly matching the effectiveness of commercial insecticidal soaps. Border plantings of aromatic herbs create protective boundaries around growing areas. Strongly scented plants like rosemary, sage, and lavender planted as hedges confuse insects searching for crop plants. These borders serve multiple purposes, providing herbs for cooking and medicine while saving actual garden space from pest invasion. Each plant releases different volatile compounds that mask the scent of desirable vegetables. An Amish garden measuring just 20 by 20 feet might include a full 2-foot perimeter of these protective plants, creating an invisible shield around valuable crops. Advanced pruning techniques. Plant energy flows like water in a stream. Directing it properly leads to abundant harvests. Pruning might seem like just cutting plants, but in the hands of skilled Amish gardeners, it becomes an art form that dramatically increases yields while keeping plants healthy and compact. Identifying energy-wasting growth separates novice gardeners from masters. Those tiny shoots that appear in the crotches of tomato stems, called suckers, can drain up to 30% of a plant's energy without contributing meaningfully to harvest. Amish gardeners inspect their plants weekly, pinching these suckers before they grow larger than a pencil eraser. This simple practice redirects energy to fruit production rather than unnecessary foliage. The same principle applies to many fruiting plants, where strategic removal of certain growth patterns results in significantly higher yields. Tomatoes respond remarkably well to proper pruning techniques. When grown in small spaces, the Amish often use the single stem method, where all suckers are removed, forcing the plant to grow one main stem that's supported by a stake or string. A properly pruned single-stem tomato plant needs just 1 square foot of garden space, yet can produce up to 20 pounds of fruit over a season. The key lies in consistency, checking plants at least weekly during peak growing season to remove new suckers before they become established. Training methods that double fruit production involve manipulating flexible stems to create more fruitful forms. Cucumber vines trained up strings produce nearly twice the harvest of those allowed to sprawl. The vertical growth creates better air circulation, reducing disease problems by up to 80%. Blackberry canes bent horizontally produce significantly more side branches, each bearing additional fruit, than those left growing straight up. These techniques allow Amish families to harvest maximum food from minimal space, turning tiny gardens into productive mini-farms. The 3-season stretch method. Growing food for just 1 season wastes precious garden space. Year-round production might seem impossible in colder climates, but Amish gardeners have developed methods to extend harvests through 3 distinct growing seasons. Their approach transforms the traditional gardening calendar into a continuous cycle of planting and harvesting. The spring, summer, fall planting schedule forms the backbone of the 3-season system. Each garden bed hosts at least 3 successive crops throughout the growing season. An early spring bed of spinach and lettuce might transition to summer beans, followed by fall carrots or kale. This succession keeps the soil constantly covered and productive. You know what they say about gardens in winter? They're just compost piles with optimistic signs. Amish gardeners prove this doesn't have to be true. Planting by moon phases might sound like superstition, but research suggests that the gravitational effects of lunar cycles influence seed germination and plant growth. Amish farmers have followed these natural rhythms for generations, sowing root crops during the waning moon when gravitational pull is weaker, allowing roots to grow downward more easily. Above-ground crops like lettuce are planted during the waxing moon when stronger gravitational pull encourages upward growth. Studies at agricultural research stations have shown that crops planted according to these principles often germinate up to 50% faster than those planted without regard to lunar cycles. Succession planting in limited spaces requires careful timing. Rather than waiting until one crop is completely finished before planting the next, Amish gardeners often start new seedlings in small containers about 2 weeks before harvesting the current crop. This head start allows them to immediately transplant the new crop once the old one is removed, saving precious growing days. A garden bed measuring just 4 by 8 feet can produce over 200 pounds of fresh vegetables annually when managed with this 3-season approach, approximately 3 times what the same space would yield with conventional single-season planting. Microgreen production system. Year-round fresh greens may seem impossible in a tiny space, but the Amish have perfected systems that deliver nutrient-dense food regardless of season or garden size. Microgreens, young vegetable seedlings harvested just days after sprouting, pack more nutrition into less space than any other growing method. From a humble 2-foot by 2-foot space, a continuous microgreen system can provide fresh greens for a family all year long. These tiny powerhouses contain up to 40 times the nutrients of their mature counterparts. A half cup of broccoli microgreens delivers the same nutritional value as 2.5 pounds of mature broccoli heads. Amish families incorporate these nutritional gold mines into their diet, especially during winter months when fresh garden produce becomes scarce. Quick harvest techniques ensure a perpetual supply from limited space. Most microgreens reach harvestable size in just 7 to 14 days, allowing for multiple harvests from the same containers each month. By staggering planting dates every 5 to 7 days, Amish gardeners maintain constant production. Shallow trays just 2 inches deep provide enough growing medium for the short-lived plants, allowing vertical stacking of multiple growing containers in small spaces. The Amish method for recycling growing medium extends the sustainability of the system. After harvest, the spent soil and root mats are added to compost where they break down quickly due to their high nitrogen content. This recycled material eventually returns to the garden, completing the nutrient cycle. Meanwhile, new batches of microgreens grow in fresh medium made primarily from materials produced on the homestead. Compost mixed with a small amount of peat moss or coconut coir for water retention. This approach maintains production while minimizing external inputs, a hallmark of traditional Amish agriculture. High-efficiency potato growing. Potatoes form the backbone of food security in many Amish communities. These calorie-dense tubers store well and provide substantial nutrition, but traditionally require significant growing space. The vertical methods developed in Amish gardens transform potato, growing from space-hungry to space-efficient. Layered growing systems allow potatoes to produce abundantly in minimal ground space. The classic Amish potato tower starts with just a small circle of fertile soil where seed potatoes are planted. As the plants grow upward, additional layers of soil are added, forcing the stems to produce more tubers along their buried length. A well-managed tower, just 3 feet in diameter, can yield up to 100 pounds of potatoes. It's like growing a skyscraper when all your neighbors can only build single-story homes. Managing soil pH gradients plays a crucial role in successful vertical potato production. Amish gardeners often create deliberate layers with slightly different pH levels to accommodate different varieties. Lower layers might maintain a pH around 5.8 for varieties that prefer more acidic conditions, while upper layers stay closer to 6.5 for types that thrive in less acidic soil. Drainage systems prevent waterlogging, the main killer of potato plants in vertical systems. Traditional Amish towers incorporate vertical drainage channels made from bundled sticks or perforated pipes placed in the center of the growing structure. These channels allow excess moisture to escape while providing oxygen to the root zone throughout the tower's height. 4-season mini greenhouse system. Extending the growing season beyond nature's limits becomes possible with properly designed small-scale greenhouse structures. The 4-foot by 8-foot greenhouse, perfected by Amish gardeners, produces food year-round, even in regions with harsh winters. Building materials remain simple yet effective in traditional Amish design. The typical frame uses locally harvested lumber, often cedar or locust, for its natural rot resistance. Covering materials vary by season. 6mm greenhouse plastic for 3-season use, with an additional interior layer added during winter for extra insulation. This double-layer approach creates an insulating air pocket that keeps night temperatures up to 15 degrees warmer than single-layer designs. The small footprint makes the structure affordable while still providing enough growing space to supplement a family's diet throughout the year. Cold-loving crops selected for winter harvesting thrive in these mini greenhouses. Vegetables like kale, spinach, mache, and certain lettuce varieties continue producing even when outdoor temperatures dip into the teens. An Amish study group in Pennsylvania documented harvests from their mini greenhouses averaging 3 to 5 pounds of fresh greens weekly throughout January and February, months typically considered impossible for fresh harvests in northern climates. Cold-hardy herbs like parsley, cilantro, and chives also perform remarkably well, providing fresh flavors during months when most gardens lie dormant. Heat retention without external energy represents perhaps the most remarkable aspect of Amish greenhouse design. Thermal mass in the form of water-filled black containers absorbs solar energy during daylight hours and releases it slowly overnight. Properly positioned, these thermal batteries maintain temperatures high enough to prevent freezing even during the coldest nights. The north wall of many Amish greenhouses incorporates stone, brick, or even stacked water jugs painted black to maximize heat retention. Insulated shutters, often closed manually at sunset and opened at sunrise, minimize overnight heat loss through the transparent walls and roof. These passive systems maintain growing temperatures without electricity or fossil fuels, a practical necessity in Amish communities and a sustainable approach for anyone. Season extension techniques. While full greenhouses provide maximum protection, simpler methods can add weeks or even months to the growing season. Low-cost season extenders developed by Amish gardeners allow nearly year-round production without major infrastructure investments. Repurposed windows find new life as cold frames in many Amish gardens. These simple structures, essentially bottomless boxes with window tops, create protected growing spaces that warm quickly on sunny days. Soil temperature inside a well-designed cold frame typically runs 10 to 15 degrees warmer than surrounding garden soil. This difference allows cold season crops to thrive long after unprotected plants have succumbed to frost. A standard window cold frame measuring 3 feet by 6 feet can produce enough salad greens for a family from late fall through early spring, with proper crop selection and management. Talk about making your windows truly enlightening. Row covers developed by Amish gardeners add 30 or more days to both ends of the growing season. Unlike commercial versions, these homemade systems use materials readily available on the homestead. Simple hoops formed from flexible saplings or repurposed electrical conduit create low tunnels over planted rows. Covering materials range from lightweight floating row covers for insect protection to heavier plastic for frost protection. The adaptable system allows covers to be added, removed, or exchanged as weather conditions change throughout the season. Early spring peas might gain 3 extra weeks of growing time, while fall lettuces continue producing well past the first frost date. Strategic placement within the garden creates natural microclimates that extend growing seasons without additional structures. South-facing walls or fences reflect sunlight and block cold north winds, creating protected growing zones that warm earlier in spring and hold heat later in fall. Stone walls or pathways absorb daytime heat and release it overnight, moderating temperature fluctuations. Raised beds with stone edges perform similarly, providing gentle warmth to plant roots. Amish gardeners harness these natural effects by positioning cold-sensitive crops in these protected pockets, often gaining 2 to 3 additional weeks of growing time without any additional equipment or expense. Perennial food strategies. Looking beyond annual vegetables reveals a world of plants that produce year after year with minimal effort. Perennial food crops form the backbone of self-sufficiency in many Amish communities, providing reliable harvests while reducing the workload of yearly planting. Space-efficient perennial vegetables selected by generations of Amish gardeners offer impressive returns for small homesteads. Asparagus, once established, produces for 20 years or more while occupying a remarkably small footprint. A 4-foot by 8-foot asparagus bed can yield up to 20 pounds annually, enough for fresh eating plus preservation. Egyptian walking onions, rhubarb, and sorrel thrive in spaces as small as 2 feet square while returning year after year without replanting. These time-tested plants convert small spaces into perpetual food sources. Maintenance requirements drop dramatically with properly established perennials. Most require only annual mulching, occasional division, and seasonal harvesting. Jerusalem artichokes, a staple in many Amish gardens, need virtually no care once established. A single square yard planting can yield 15 pounds or more of nutritious tubers annually with zero maintenance beyond harvesting. This efficiency becomes crucial in maintaining food production during busy seasons when other garden tasks demand attention. Amish gardeners skillfully integrate medicinal and culinary herbs within their food production systems. Perennial herbs like thyme, oregano, sage, and mint serve multiple purposes: flavoring meals, treating common ailments, and attracting beneficial insects. These useful plants often occupy edges and borders, turning otherwise unused spaces into productive zones. Lemon balm and catnip deter pest insects while providing calming teas. The deliberate interplanting of culinary and medicinal species throughout the garden, rather than isolating them in a separate herb garden, maximizes both space efficiency and beneficial interactions. Space-efficient food. Storage solutions. Growing abundant food solves only half the challenge. Properly storing that bounty completes the self-sufficiency equation. Amish households have developed ingenious storage methods that preserve harvests without requiring large dedicated spaces or electricity. Mini root cellars created from 5-gallon buckets transform small spaces into effective storage systems. The technique involves burying food-grade buckets up to their rims in shaded locations, then filling them with layers of damp sand alternated with root vegetables like carrots, beets, and turnips. A second bucket inverted over the top and secured with a heavy rock creates a simple seal. These bucket cellars maintain temperatures between 35 and 45 degrees throughout winter, ideal for root crop storage. An Amish family with just 6 such buckets can store over 100 pounds of root vegetables in a combined space smaller than a coffee table. Those fancy refrigerator crisper drawers suddenly seem rather high maintenance by comparison. The cool corner method, adapted by Amish families living in smaller homes, allows food storage without dedicated root cellars. This approach identifies naturally cooler areas within the home, often north-facing corners of basements or pantries, and modifies them for optimal storage conditions. Simple shelving with cloth curtains creates microclimates where different foods receive appropriate humidity and temperature levels. Onions and garlic hang in mesh bags where air circulation prevents sprouting. Squash and pumpkins rest on shelves where regular inspection allows prompt use of any showing signs of spoilage. These arrangements maintain orderly food storage while maximizing available space. Modular storage systems developed in Amish communities adapt to changing seasonal needs. Shelving units designed for easy reconfiguration allow the same space to store different crops as the seasons progress. Early fall might see shelves spaced widely for curing winter squash, while later configurations provide closer spacing for jars of preserved foods. This adaptability allows tiny homes to store substantial food reserves by adjusting storage density throughout the year. These Amish gardening techniques demonstrate that abundant food production doesn't require vast acreage. By combining careful planning, space-efficient methods, and generations of wisdom, anyone can grow a year's worth of food in even the tiniest homestead. The secret isn't more space, it's smarter growing.